Let's see. Patrick, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me on.
How are you this morning? Patrick Ishmael's with the Show Me Institute. Do you like slot machines?
I do kind of like slot machines. I'm not really a big gambler, but it's funny that the study was talking about the loudness, trying to convince people that more is happening than really is. That almost sounds like government oftentimes.
Yeah, the louder you are, the squeaky wheel, so to speak. Now, Patrick Ishmael is with the Show Me Institute, and we're going to be talking about some economic issues in Missouri. But would you remind the folks, Patrick, what is, and we do this often because I want folks to know for sure what Show Me Institute is all about. What is your organization about?
Sure. Well, the Show Me Institute is a free market think tank. We use a lot of academic language to describe why free markets are important. You can talk about efficiencies, aggregation of knowledge, but really when we say that we believe in the free market, what we're saying is we believe in people, that we trust people with their money, and we think that if they have their money, they're going to be able to spend that money more efficiently and effectively than the government will be. And quite frankly, it's important that we empower people to be able to take care of themselves, take care of their family, their friends, their communities, their city, their state. We think it's better to keep that money with people where possible than to put that with money with the government.
Now, Patrick, you're a policy analyst, and so we're going to talk about some economic issues, particularly when House Bill 253 went down last week. What is your impression of that? And here's my impression, then I'd like your viewpoint. That kind of like a slot machine, that when the audio is loud, we really didn't get the full story. We got a lot of politicians saying that the sky was about to fall, and I'm particularly talking about education. The governor said that education would lose, when actually that wasn't the case. And so I think that, and I'm interested in your viewpoint, but my viewpoint is that there was a lot of rhetoric in and around House Bill 253 that simply wasn't true.
I agree with that. You hear all these calamities, this parade of horribles that is kind of trotted out there, that education won't be funded. That isn't, by the way that the bill was structured, what was going to happen. In the end, the bill itself was a pretty modest tax cut. I mean, it's a tax cut that I would have hoped, if it had passed, wouldn't have been the last word on tax cuts in the state, because the state of Missouri is in a very competitive economic region where you have Kansas on one side that's cutting taxes and eliminating some taxes. You have Texas to the south that doesn't have an income tax, South Dakota, Nebraska. South Dakota doesn't have an income tax. Nebraska is looking to get rid of theirs. Oklahoma is looking to get rid of theirs. Missouri finds itself in a pretty great opportunity if it doesn't maintain the status quo. If we keep taxes where they are, we're probably going to be in a world of hurt, because there are other pro-growth states around us that are looking to empower individuals in those states to grow those states. And I would hope that Missouri would follow suit. This particular bill was a pretty modest step. I think it was overstated what the any harmful effects that would have been. But at the end of the day, it couldn't have been the last step anyway.
Well, and here we are now as a follower in business in the Midwest. You mentioned all of the states that have changed. Missouri is certainly not on the list. If you are interested in doing business, Missouri is not at the top of the list anymore. I mean, some of our competitive states around us have more, or at a competitive advantage over Missouri.
Well, we actually just concluded an event in Kansas City, and the title of the event was, "Is it time to leave Kansas City?" And that's not a question we're just plucking out of the air. I mean, I'm from Kansas City. I want the city to do extraordinarily well. But the problem right now, and particularly in view of what Kansas has done, is that Kansas City in particular is pretty uncompetitive when it comes to tax policy. You have the income tax of 6% at the state level, earnings tax of 1% on top of that. You have sales taxes, which are among the highest in the country in the Kansas City area. And the question for a lot of individuals and a lot of businesses is, how long can I sustain remaining in the city under this taxing environment when I have this opportunity to go to Kansas instead and avoid a lot of this taxation? We're uncompetitive when you look at it from a national perspective. And from 97 to 2011, we were 48th in GDP growth, 46th in employment growth, 43rd in GDP per capita growth, which is really just a complex way of saying we're not doing well economically. And the notion that we're somehow a low-tax state, despite the fact that in practice we really aren't, and relative to other states, specifically Kansas and particularly Kansas, but lots of other states, Missouri needs to change course. And I think it's really important that we look and listen to the people who are creating jobs and those who are employed in those jobs, those that are seeking some sort of tax relief, some folks that are seeking a way to be empowered so that they can do better for their kids and better for their families, or else they may have to go someplace else. And oftentimes that someplace else isn't that far away. It's just a state away.
Patrick Ishmael is here with the Show Me Institute, and we'll take phone calls, 862-9977, 1-800-375-0056. It's Morning Line on AM 560 KWTO. Home stretch of Morning Line on a Tuesday morning. We are visiting with Patrick Ishmael of the Show Me Institute. For more information, go to showmeinstitute.org, showmeinstitute.org. And on that website, I want to call your attention to something, Patrick, and then we'll get back to some of the other economic issues. This is, I think, fascinating, and I hope our listeners will go to the website, showmeinstitute.org. It says a meter. There's a meter there, and it's called a spendometer of how much money the state of Missouri is spending in fiscal year 2014. It's at $25 billion, and it divides it out by month, by week, by day, by hour, by minute, by second. And Patrick, this spendometer shows that the state of Missouri spends roughly $800 per second. $800 per second, $47,000 per minute, $2,800,000 per hour, $68,800,000 per day, $482,900,000 per week, $2 billion per month, totaling over $25 billion annually. What are we spending all that money on?
Good question. A lot of that has to do with Missouri Health Net, Medicaid, education, transportation. But we also spend it, we can always find efficiencies in a lot of those programs anyway, but we also effectively spend it by reducing our revenue through tax credits, tax incentives. The question I always like asking is, are we satisfied with the services that we're being provided for the amount of money that we're paying for it? And I always like quoting Milton Friedman on this. Milton Friedman said, I'm always in favor of cutting taxes under any circumstances and for any excuse, for any reason, whenever it's possible. And the reason Milton Friedman was, because he believes the big problem isn't taxes, the big problem is spending. And when you look at a state that's spending, $800 a second, are we really satisfied with the kind of services that we're receiving in return? I think you can find a lot of efficiencies in the government, a lot of programs that should probably be cut back or simply reformed. Medicaid needs to be reformed. Certainly education funding needs to be reformed. But I think that the spendometer is very good at kind of breaking down so you can see it in action. Because on the website, it's dialing up, it's counting up, but there is that per second, per minute breakdown as well that really, hammers home, I think, how much money we're spending, how quickly we're spending it, and how under normal circumstances, if it weren't the government, we'd just be aghast at it because, our own personal budgets, our family budgets are just a fraction of this, and yet the government seems to always be getting larger.
Now, you can see this spendometer in action. Just go to showmeinstitute.org, showmeinstitute.org to see this in action. And, here's the bottom line, and back to the spendometer and House Bill 253. In the name of education, that House bill was defeated. Why is it that if anyone criticizes the state spending, they're seen as someone that is opposed to education, when really it's all about common sense spending?
Well, I think that you can. There are lots of arguments that are made against tax cuts, and a lot of them aren't credible. Most of them, as I've come to find out, really aren't credible. And whether you're talking about education or Medicaid, whether you're trying to talk about expanding the program or just leaving the program as is and slowly growing it. I think a lot of times the argument is being made that they want government to be larger, whether it's education or some other part of the budget. There are just some folks who think that it is better to have government big and growing rather than small and more efficient. And I would hope that, as a state, we are the show me state, that we want to see some evidence that this program, whether it's talking about Medicaid or education, is actually working, that we're actually getting what we're paying for, that we're satisfied with what we're paying for. And then the fact of the matter is, I don't think Missourians are very happy with a lot of these programs. But, oftentimes folks who want tax cuts to empower individuals are portrayed as somehow, uncompassionate. When in fact one of the most compassionate things you could do is reform these programs, and yet the same groups oftentimes are opposed to that reform. It's oftentimes about the size of government that they want to grow, has less to do with really the substance of the reforms that you're talking about.
That's well stated, and it appears to me that anyone that is for lower taxes and for a common sense budget in terms of education in Missouri is seen as radical. And that's not the case at all. Everyone wants to have good education for their kids and for the children of Missouri. Everyone wants to see that. But the bottom line is, with this House Bill 253 and the spendometer that's on the website, is that the local businessman is having a hard enough time with his own taxes, and now it makes sense to think about having a business in Kansas, having a business in Oklahoma or Texas, where it's so much easier to have a small business than it is in Missouri.
Yeah, and if you believe in free markets, you really probably believe in tax cuts. And the fact is, like I said earlier, if you believe in free markets, you're believing in tax cuts because you believe in people. You believe in not an economy driven by government intervention, but an economy driven by individual innovation. You want to empower the individual, and I think that Missouri needs to work harder to make sure that those individuals are empowered with more of their money so they can reinvest in the state and make it better.
So where do we go from here now that this House Bill 253 is gone? I gets back to the drawing board in January, and do you think that the General Assembly has gotten the message, or do you think that's going to be more difficult in the coming sessions when it starts in January?
It may be more. It may be easier to pass a tax cut bill through the House and Senate, making some modifications to if they wanted to HB 253. I'll leave that politics to politicians. What I will say, though, is that Missouri does need some serious tax cuts. What the legislature did do that they ought to be commended for is they passed a bill called the Volunteer Health Services Act. And what the Volunteer Health Services Act does is they allow for out-of-state doctors to provide free care to Missourians here in the state. There was an instance in Joplin a couple of years ago where licensed optometrists from another state weren't allowed to provide free eyeglasses to residents there after the tornado. And so the Volunteer Health Services Act is a good step and is a good law to make sure that people can help people, that Americans can help Missourians, and that we're not going to get in the way of people being helped just because of licensing laws. But as to tax cuts, I think the tax cuts will probably come back. I don't know necessarily the prospects of any particular proposal, but I do think that Missouri needs tax relief, and I'm sure that it will probably be engaged. Whether it's passed in the next session, I don't know, but we can always hope.
Visiting with Patrick Ishmael of the Show Me Institute. And for more information, you can go to showmeinstitute.org to see the spendometer, showmeinstitute.org. It's a good idea if you are in a conversation to have this website and say, go to Show Me Institute and take a look at that spendometer, and it'll say exactly what I'm talking about. I've done that a time or two. Let me ask you a general question in our remaining moments, Patrick, and I'd like your answer. Is Missouri truly a low-tax state, as the liberals claim, and as this argument around House Bill 253? We are a low-tax state. Looking at all of the states and as much evidence and as much research as a policy analyst as you can muster. Is Missouri truly a low-tax state?
I don't believe so. I think really the evidence runs a very different direction. At best, Missouri is a middling tax state, and in some regards a pretty high tax state, particularly in a lot of your urban areas where sales taxes can run into 10, 11, even north of 12%. And that's in addition to an income tax, even though it's graduated, that top rate kicks in at a very low, relatively low dollar amount. And so even compared to our surrounding states, Missouri has a pretty high income tax that kicks in pretty early. And in addition to that, you have the sales taxes, and then in some areas you have some pretty bad property taxes as well. I think combined state and local sales taxes, the state of Missouri ranks 16th in terms of rates in the country. I don't see that as being a indicator of a low tax state. And in fact, I would argue, particularly relative to our competition that's close by, we're higher than we ought to be, and we need to have some reform.
And this just in, which you didn't mention, is the usage tax, which is what Greene and Christian County will be voting upon this fall.
I mean, I got to say, there is really no limit to the innovation that the government has in terms of creating new taxes, thinking of new ways to get money out of taxpayers. It really needs to stop at some point, and it's in the state's best interest for taxes to be lower and in the best interest of individuals.
Well, for more information and to see this spendometer, you can go to showmeinstitute.org, or you can telephone to learn more about the Show Me Institute. And here's the phone number, 314-454-0647. 314-454-0647. What else are you all working on? I know that you all are full-time doing the best you can to help a small businessman in Missouri.
Well, I mean, we have offered up proposals in the past of how to reduce taxes. I think that we can get rid of business taxation in this state pretty easily. I think if you have some tax credit reform and some other efficiencies of government, you could really get rid of some of the most destructive taxes to growth here in the state. So we're going to be following up on that previous report with at least one essay, and we'll be talking about it around the state. I'm working on a Medicaid reform proposal. I think that when you look at the current Medicaid program in the state of Missouri, it's broken. It needs reform. We're looking at doing that right now. And then we have a variety of other projects, local governance with David Stokes, education with James Scholes, two of our other policy analysts. It's a busy time at the Show Me Institute. So if you guys have any interest, have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us.
How do we get involved? How do we get involved in your message?
Well, you can, of course, all of our material is available online. You can share it with a friend, talk to people about it, ask us questions about it. You can always ask us questions over email. Our emails are all available on the website, mine included. You can give us a phone call, again, 314-454-0647. And you can interact with us on our social media sites. We're on Facebook. Just look us up. Twitter as well.
That's so important because in this argument over House Bill 253, if folks have in their back pocket the truth as to there was a trigger, there was a watermark to protect education, if you have the resources available to say, no, that's not the case, then I think that House Bill 253 might have been able to be overridden. And it just takes as much of a fight as you can by having the research and being able to educate folks on the truth. Isn't that right?
We're delighted to be a resource to anyone who's interested, either who's active or looking to just know more about how their government works. And that's what the Show Me Institute is all about, is educating about the free market values that we really value, that we really hold dear. And really, again, like I said, the free market is people, and that's who we believe in.
Appreciate your time. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
For more information, go to showmeinstitute.org. Showmeinstitute.org. Patrick Ishmael with the Show Me Institute.